Well, it certainly feels like winter out there as we have what could be a very interesting, and who knows, it might even break records. We shall see. With a major lake effect snow event for western New York, north central New York, northwest PA, and parts of northeast Ohio. Early winter covers a large portion of the country. If it's not cold, it's some snow. And we're going to be talking about all of that, where we're going for the next few days and next week, which is horribly confusing after the middle part of next week. But you know what? We always seem to find a way to try to figure it out. We will do that here on the Joe and Joe Weather Show, brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York, and Southwest Suffolk County on Long Island. And of course, with all this talk of snow, this is a good time. You don't wait for the snow event to make sure you have what you need. You get it ahead of time. And they are Long Island's largest rock salt source. And they have all the great snow melt products. Am I keeping you awake, Mr. Rayo? Just want to know. Are you there?
I'm fine.
Okay.
I'm fine.
Just checking.
Yeah.
Right in the middle of a commercial for our sponsor. Really nice. Mag Ice Pellets and Flakes, Pelledo, and so much more, because if it's not that, you might need a brand new beautiful snowblower, and they have them along with shovels, scrapers, batteries, flashlights, generators. They're all at Omni. Again, 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, 631-756-1125 for the best prices in town. And the website is
OmniTrueValue.com. You should all know that by now. That is the place. And indeed, Joe was right. It might very well be you may need some of that stuff by the end of next week. Maybe.
Yes.
Possibly.
Well, who knows?
We'll see.
I don't know. You know that I know what you're referring to, and I'm far from thinking that that's there's no way that that's a done deal at this point. There's all sorts of possibilities. But you know what? First things first. It's almost surreal. I'm going to bring this up. By the way, welcome to everybody on the chat board. There's a link. There are links up at the. There's a link at the top of the chat. You can download my free weather apps, so go ahead and download them, because if you ever want to look at every snowfall forecast map from Maine to Florida all in one page, it's all there, among so many other things. So go ahead and download the free app. And anyway, it's almost surreal, Joe, because I have the Weather Service snow forecast map for that was put out by NWS in Buffalo. And aside from the fact that they are, all the colors are just, they really do blend together quite nicely. The 36 to 48 inch snowfall from Buffalo south and west, right, with I-90, by the way, going right through that zone. Just really stands out, and it even takes out the 24 to 36 inches at the 24 to 30 inch forecast that they have up for Watertown. I think they're going to run out of colors if they have to go to anything higher. But this is going to be really fascinating to watch.
One of the local television weather forecasters, who will go nameless, was talking about, they're going to have lake effect snow in Buffalo, and they're looking for, and then he turned to his the two anchors at the desk, 1 to 2 feet of snow, would you believe, by the end of the weekend? And I said, 1 to 2 feet? Is that all he's saying, is 1 to 2? And naturally, both of them behind the news or anchor desk said, oh, well, they know all about that. They know how to handle that in Buffalo. And I'm saying, yeah, 1 foot or 2, yes, but 3 to 4 feet or maybe 5 feet, no. And that's going to be like a major news story nationally. And I hope that if that indeed does come to pass, let's hope that they can get through it. But if it does come to pass, I hope that on Monday that the two news anchors, or one of them, turns to the weathercaster who said 1 to 2 feet. He said, I thought you said only 1 to 2 feet.
You were a bit short.
You were a bit short.
A bit short. Well, this forecast, by the way, just to be clear, this forecast goes through 7 p.m. Saturdays. There's still one more day of it on Sunday. Although by Sunday the wind will go from west-southwest to more northwest. So that'll turn the lake effect to happen in areas that, uh, for example, Springville here has got 8 to 12, and Dunkirk gets as 18 to 24. When that wind goes around, uh, they'll probably pick up more snow, and Buffalo would get less, far less, with the northwest wind on Sunday. Then, of course, the northwest wind over Lake Ontario means that places like Rochester, Sodus, Geneva, uh, I never knew there was a place called Weedsport, and Fulton will pick up more. And this is gonna rival, this may rival the one from 2014, which was um, which was quite a lake effect snow event up there. Again, also measured in several feet or more, not just a foot or two.
Yes. And that one was, it seems hard for me to believe that that was 8 years ago. That big storm only seemed to me like it happened like, 3, 4, 5 years ago. 8 years ago that happened, that Buffalo was buried. So,
Well, that's what you know what that's what I thought too. And then I looked it up, and it said the year said 14, but I can remember doing a live stream or two where where this was talked about. I don't know, maybe I did it, whether I did it by myself or whether we did it together. But that's what came up when I Googled it. I'll Google it again. Lake effect.
Johnny Quest on the chat board says, any comparison to 1977. Now, I remember the 77 Buffalo blizzard, as it was called, where they picked up like 50 or 60 inches of snow. And I'm not sure. All I can tell you about 77, Johnny, is that it was a very sharp cold front that came through the region, came through New York State. And I guess the winds were west-southwest, as they will be in the coming days ahead, enough so that it turned out to be a huge amount of snow. I remember listening. I was living in Throgs Neck at the time. And how old was I in 77? I was, 21 years old? And I was DXing. I was listening to KBW out of Buffalo. And I still remember, and I even made an air check of this, Joe. The guy at KBW in Buffalo said quite simply, all events in the city tonight are canceled. Everything is canceled. I didn't even think about where this poor guy probably had to go. Maybe he slept at the radio station. I don't know if he could have even made it to a hotel. But that was a mammoth snowfall as well, the 77 event.
But the thing with 77 was that the lake effect up there pretty much went on all month. It was
in January.
It was in January. It was every single day. I think it snowed for 31 or 32 days in a row in Buffalo. And for the season, by the way, I think that's still their season record, which was 109. The snowfall total for the season was, I think, 199.5 inches, something like that, or 199.3. They couldn't get the 7/10 of an inch to get it, or the half an inch to take it over the 200 mark.
The one story related to the Buffalo blizzard of 1977. In fact, the very next year was the blizzard of 78 for our part of the country. And in fact, in parts of Rhode Island, they had from that storm up to 50 inches of snow. And one of the people I used to work with daily in the morning on the radio, WHJJ in Providence, Rhode Island, was Sherm Strickhauser, the dean of Southern New England Talk Radio. And he told me that one of the local TV stations showed a view on, I guess, I-95 or whatever, of all of the machines, the Buffalo snow machines, coming into the Providence and the Rhode Island area. And they came to like the city limits. And one of the guys got out of this huge truck, came around and like surveyed the scene and said, this is nothing. We'll have you out within a few hours. And that stuck in Sherm's mind, and I guess everybody in Rhode Island's mind, that the folks in Buffalo came to rescue us. I know that in the Northeast, everybody was, sending their snow machines to Buffalo to help out in the clearing, because that was a tremendous amount of snow that they had in '77. I have a feeling that Buffalo may need some help coming up this weekend, so I'm sure we'll be sending our own batch of whatever we can loan out, as long as it's back maybe by the end of next week, because well, I don't know. I'm like you, Joe. I don't know what to say and what to tell anybody about.
It's the
Uh,
fourth or fifth. It's the fourth or fifth model change in a row. It went back to my original theory with the blocking coming down, and of course, then the 18Z comes out and it's completely different. So anyway, we'll get to that in a moment. I just wanted to also bring up um, the snowfall map for Northwest PA, Pennsylvania, and Ohio, because they're kind of on the edge of this. But just bear in mind that this forecast map from the Weather Service only goes to 7 p.m. Thursday. So these numbers are going to go up. So at least through 7 p.m. Thursday, they have 8 to 10 for Erie and 8 to 10 for Ashtabula, 3 to 4 for Andover, 1 to 2 for Cortland, 1 to 2 for Cleveland, and then less as you go west of Cleveland. I almost got a TV job in Cleveland. I was actually to the point where I was looking for homes, and they told me that the east side of I wanted to buy a home on the east side of Cleveland because the lake effect east of Cleveland was better than the lake effect that occurs west of Cleveland. But that did not pan out, sadly, because they were going to pay me stupid money. But no matter. That's water under the bridge. And Justin Vale, Joe, by the way, as we switch over to the U.S. satellite view, Justin Vale says he's watching us tonight on a big screen, and he says it's incredible. I think he said incredible. We are the biggest things on television.
yes, indeed. I'm not even turned sideways like Ralph Cramden. By the way, Chuck Cardillo writes that his wife and Chuck lived in Buffalo in 1977, and the storm fell from January 28th through February 1st nonstop. The snow was up to the second floor of her home. She is looking for the newspaper now to try to find out. I guess they held on to that all of these years because it is something historic. But I read somewhere where there were snow drifts of like as high as like 40 or 50 feet, 40 to 50 feet in parts of the Buffalo area in the wake of that '77 blizzard. And thank you to, who is it? David Schwartz, who asks the question with Super Chats, can you check out the 10 to 14 day forecast for Florida as I am traveling there soon? We will do that for you, David. I'll at least check it out from Climate Prediction Center, and maybe Joe will give me sharing capabilities, and we'll bring it up a bit later on in
Well,
the show.
maybe I'll give you sharing capabilities. I think it's always it's always a possibility. But on the satellite tonight, there's a lot of clouds, but in terms of storminess, not really very much. You've got moisture streaming up from Mexico across the western Gulf states and into the southeast. It finally cleared out here late this morning, so the sunshine at least was enough to take temperatures up above the 40-degree mark. We are now approaching the freezing mark here in northeast Georgia. In the meantime, a lot of clouds around the Great Lakes. There's some snow going on the radar, which we'll check out. There's still some leftover clouds in parts of the Northeast, although it did break out nicely along the coast, albeit didn't do a whole lot to take the chill out of the air. And you can see some energy that's coming in to the Pacific Northwest. There's just a very, very broad upper trough here that extends from the northern Rockies all the way to the east, covers a large portion of the country, and it's spread. Everybody from the Rockies east, actually even west of the Rockies, everybody's cold. This is one of those times, if you remember the outlooks from CPC had virtually the whole nation except for South Florida below normal as far as temperatures were concerned in this time frame that we've now arrived in. Or arriving in, And here's a close-up view of the northeast loop. You can see the clouds out to the west, but there's breaks around. There's not a whole lot happening. And as we check out the radar, we're actually, Joe, beginning to see some. Now there's some areas here where it still might not be cold, and there's some issues aloft until the upper trough goes by. But uh, there's there's a band of precip running along just offshore northern Ohio and Lake Erie and coming into southwestern New York and into the Buffalo region. So you can see what the wind flow, folks, is doing here to make this happen. It's actually going across the lakes the long way, uh, the wind flow. So you've got quite a bit. It's one thing when you get lake effect going this way, because that's not a whole lot of miles from one side of Lake Erie to the other. But when you're going from west to east, that is a long fetch of moisture, and that is going to feed all that snow that's going to go piling into southwestern New York from Buffalo southward, and also in Lake Ontario with the west wind. It's kind of west southwest and then sort of bends back westward across Lake Ontario. That's bringing heavy snow bands inland near Pulaski and Watertown. So it is beginning as far as the radar is concerned.
Yes, indeed. And again, if you want to make for a historic lake effect snow event, it doesn't happen all in one day. As Chuck Cardillo mentioned, in '77, it went from the 28th of January to February the 1st. That's 3 days, 4 days actually, and this is something that has been promoted by the Buffalo Weather Service for several days now, talking about from Thursday all the way out to next Sunday or even Monday of next week. So that's when we'll be seeing the final snow accumulations, the final snow amounts. I think I saw something from AccuWeather, a map that they had for the entire event, and I think their contours, Joe, went up to 72 inches at the peak, just in and
Wow.
around and southwest of the Buffalo area. So, you know, once you get past 2 or 3 feet, it's more than enough. But this is going to be something that they're going to be digging out from for a good long time.
Yeah, I was also thinking too. I know we've often, you've heard me say how one of these years I really would like to just drive up there and watch it. And I was thinking about that today, and I thought, it probably one of these things where I would go up there and uh, be ready for it. And as soon as it started snowing, there'll be a point after about the fourth or fifth inch that I would probably start regretting that I did go that I did go up to watch. Because really, seriously, if these there are storm chasers that are headed up there. I've seen a few of them post. I even contacted one that was on our chat board last night. Um, and the first thing I said to him was, please make sure you're extra careful because you don't want to get something, you don't want something to happen to you, so don't do anything. I mean, I didn't word it this way, but basically, don't do anything to get, stupid.
Yeah,
Really,
exactly,
don't do
exactly.
err always on the side of caution. And by the way, we do have snow going on in and around the Great Lakes, also around Lake Michigan, coming into the west side of Michigan, and some patches of snow. I was looking at the obs in western New York right now, and the temperatures are all pretty much hovering around between 33 and 36. So, and also the snow that they're reporting in some of the stations is on the light side. Watertown was 33 with light snow. So once they get into intensity, those temperatures are going to probably drop down into the 20s, especially when these upper troughs go by and more cold air comes in. So looking at at what's going to be quite the event, and we're going to talk about it more certainly tomorrow when it will be, pretty much through the first part of it, because this is, as we said, this is going to go through into Sunday, and it's when they put up a winter storm watch days in advance, they're serious about it.
I'm looking at a news report concerning the NFL. game that is going to occur on Sunday. The Buffalo Bills host the Cleveland Browns on Sunday afternoon. At least that game is on the schedule as of Wednesday morning, as of this morning. Something might have to change because there's a forecast for a mega blizzard over the weekend in western New York, and meteorologists are warning that there could be a historic snowfall. One forecast says Buffalo and its southern suburbs may receive as much as 3 to 6 feet of snow by Sunday. Needless to say, that could be a problem for the Bills game. Now, you say to yourself, all right, so they can't play on Sunday. Maybe they can move it to later in the week. Maybe they could do it on Tuesday or Wednesday or even Thursday. But of course, Thursday is Thanksgiving, and the storm in Buffalo comes on a bad weekend for the NFL in terms of scheduling, because guess what? The Buffalo Bills are scheduled to play in Detroit against the Lions on Thanksgiving. The Lions always have traditionally a game on Thanksgiving. This year, guess what? It's the Buffalo Bills' turn to play the Detroit Lions. But the NFL cannot simply move the game to Monday or even Tuesday, as it's done in other similar situations. The Bills have a short week, even if they play on Sunday. So it seems hard to believe that the game will happen as scheduled. If there's 3 or 6 feet of snow in Buffalo, it would be dangerous for fans to attempt to travel to the stadium. This is in Orchard Park, not in Buffalo proper, but still within a stone's throw of Buffalo. The Browns might not even be able to get to Buffalo if the snow is as bad as forecasted. So there's going to be a problem. Now, in 2014, we just mentioned this a few minutes ago, the last time Buffalo was faced with just such a situation with a tremendous amount of snow. In 2014, a Bills home game against the New York Jets was moved to Detroit due to snow. Now the Lions are on the road this week as they play the Giants. They're going to be playing the Giants this week at Giant Stadium. So theoretically, the Bills could actually stay in Detroit for the Thanksgiving game. Moving the Browns versus the Bills to Detroit seems like a possibility for the NFL. And maybe, just maybe, they might be able to do that. It certainly would seem quite possible that they should do that, because it doesn't seem likely that anybody is going to be watching football in Buffalo on Sunday, because ain't nobody who's going to be able to get to the stadium on Sunday because of all of that snow.
Yeah, it is problematic. I just wanted to show everybody the European model. This is one of those instances where, and I think when you see what some of the forecasts don't necessarily match up with what the models are showing. Just give me a moment, Joe. I'm just trying to figure this out here.
Yes.
But here we go. All right, so the European, again, courtesy of Pivotal Weather, is giving 20.4 inches for Watertown, 20.6 for Buffalo. They have the European model, the way they have it drawn, have the heaviest snow right along the lake shore and in the lake itself. Now, who knows if that's going to be the case? I just want to take a look and see what the GFS did with this, and just for comparison's sake. But this is one of those instances where the models are not really going to handle the max amounts well at all.
No.
So it's almost pointless to show it. But since we do have it, I figured why not. Yeah, I mean, even the GFS only generates 16.8 for Buffalo and 9.3 for Jamestown. They actually have more for Watertown than they do for Buffalo, 24.7. And then, of course, because of the wind direction, places like Rochester and Syracuse, which usually benefit more from a northwest wind, only 2.8 inches at Rochester and only 1.9 for Syracuse. This is the 12Z run, by the way. And I know everybody was kind of looking at whatever the model was doing, Joe. They for Thanksgiving weekend or going into Thanksgiving weekend. So these are the snow totals, just so for laughs. I mean, they've got 2 feet in Saratoga, 2 feet at Albany, 1.5 feet at Poughkeepsie, and then of course down near the coast, it's only about several inches there. But as I said, as we flip from run to run, this stuff changes completely. Not somewhat, but I mean completely. So
Yeah, and this is where experience comes into play. Somebody who's just out of college, or somebody, I think the for me, I think it's 5 years. You need to have or put in 5 years of doing this, because you're going to, as I mentioned with the analogy with the Olympic skater who said, I fell on my tush any number of times when I was starting out. You're gonna blow some forecasts. Some of the forecasts you're gonna be blowing are big time over the first 5 years. But you're gonna be learning by your mistakes. And somebody who's only in the business for 2-3 years. Oh well, the GFS is calling for 15.3 inches in Buffalo. So I'll go, snowfalls of 12 to 18 inches. No, you don't do that. You got to mix in some of your experience and your knowledge, and that southwesterly wind is going to persist for more than a couple of days, and there's going to be a lot more snow. I mean, you can't just simply look at the model, see what it turns out, and say, okay, I'm going with that. You have to. It's called the man-machine mix, and again, somebody who's been in the business for only a few years or right out of college, they certainly are not going to be able to have the experience of handling a situation if they're forecasting around the Buffalo area, as opposed to someone who's been there a very long time and have seen any number of these kind of events. And look, I mean, here we are. We're referencing the '77 storm, the 2014 storm, the 2000 storm. You got to experience some of this stuff to realize, hey, this is something that the regular model guidance simply can't handle. You have to add in your experience, your empiricism, to make a good forecast.
Oh, yeah, no question, no question. But these days, if it's whatever's in front of them on the piece of paper is pretty much, or on the computer screen is pretty much what they go with. There's no context. There's no nothing. So anyway,
I mean, I did. Somebody said to me, he said, I once plotted out some data. I think it was for a snowstorm a year or so ago, or whatever. And I put it up. It was from some of the weather maps that I used to plot sectionals on 30, 40 years ago. I still have some of those maps. And some guy made a comment on Facebook, looks like Joe Rayo is an old school guy. Yeah, okay. I'm happy. I'll wear that as a badge of honor, that I'm an old school guy, because back in the day, and I know you did this too, Joe, we used to plot, hourly observations. We used to look at the maps and everything else. And from that, we learned a lot, and we were able to get a better grip on. Now the people who are doing this, they just do it right off the internet, and they don't even bother to plot or to look at any of the observations. That's not good news. You need to do that to get a good firm handle on the current weather, and also to make a good forecast.
well, I mean, just from the standpoint of simple observations, Joe. Last night, one of the first things I did last night on the air was I had the map up with the plots, and we went through all the surface obs. I don't know that any of them even do that, because they'll look at the radar. There'll be a snowstorm going on, and all they'll be doing is looking at computer graphics and the HRRR for the next hour or so. I mean, it's mind blowing. It's just totally mind blowing. By the way, you've got your 8 to 14 day outlook map up, so you go ahead.
Right, I forgot already on the chat board who requested, and he called it the 10 to 14 dates.
David Schwartz.
David Schwartz. Okay, David. So here's what Climate Prediction Center is going for the 8 to 14 day outlook. If you're going down to Florida, near normal conditions. That's what the gray is indicative of, is near normal. So if you're aware of the climatology of wherever you're going to be in Florida, then there should be no major deficiencies, either below normal or even above normal conditions. In fact, take a look, Joe. It looks like 2/3 of the country in that 8 to 14 day time frame, from the 24th through the end of the month, the 30th, will be at or above normal, especially so over parts of the Central Plains like Nebraska, parts of Kansas, the Texas, Oklahoma Panhandle area. These will be the warm spots and also warm out in the Pacific Northwest. Below normal, still hanging on over portions of the mid Atlantic and the Piedmont area of the east, and also across central and northern New England. Now, how about precipitation wise? Well, in terms of precipitation for that same time frame, the whole eastern part of the United States is above normal, not by a whole heck of a lot. In fact, only a 33 to 40% chance of above normal precipitation. Central part of the U.S., below normal, and also above normal over the Pacific Northwest. But out there, again, remember, they are also going to be above normal temperature wise as well. Here's the thing I want to show all of you, and all of you who are snow lovers will be salivating at this. The 8 to 14 day U.S. hazards outlook, and this is for first precipitation, the 24th, which is Thanksgiving, through the 26th, which would be the Sunday of Thanksgiving. No, excuse me, the Saturday of Thanksgiving weekend. So you've got above normal, a slight chance of above normal, all the way up and down the eastern seaboard from the Gulf Coast all the way up to down East Maine. However, you remember some parts of the east will be below normal, and here's what's going to get everybody excited who is a snow lover, Joe. The risk of heavy snow, a slight chance from the 26th and 25th and 26th of November. Let me close in on this for you, and you can get an idea of what we're talking about. This is for southwestern Virginia, portions of eastern West Virginia, a part of central Pennsylvania, virtually all of New York State, the lower Hudson Valley, New York, and Long Island are out of this, but much of the Northeast, a slight risk of heavy snow. And that, again, is for the time frame from the 25th and 26th of November. That would be the day after, that would be Black Friday and the Saturday of Thanksgiving weekend, the 26th. And again, this is not my forecast. It is the folks over at the Climate Prediction Center. Notice also experimental. They're talking about that slight risk from the CPC of possible significant snowfall sometime during Thanksgiving weekend in this area. Also, I should point out, in terms of wind, they've got quite a bit of wind from the 24th to the 26th. So apparently, they are looking at a storm that may bring significant precipitation and also significant wind to the Northeast. And this all comes either right at or soon after Thanksgiving. I personally think that Thanksgiving will be okay, but after that, a lot of question marks as to what to expect for Black Friday and Saturday and on into Sunday of Thanksgiving weekend. And up until then, from now till Thanksgiving, about as tranquil and as quiet a weather regime as one could possibly ask for. But things may very well change very quickly right after Turkey Day on Thursday of next week.
Well, that forecast, which I'm guessing they probably had most of it done before the Dayside GFS run was came out. Actually, the GFS at 12Z matches their forecast almost perfectly. I'm gonna show that now. And first off, though, I want to point out, I think this is going to be, I mentioned this 2 nights ago and last night, and I'm going to say it again. One of the important factors here is the fact that the NAO, the North Atlantic Oscillation, measuring pressure changes in the North Atlantic, so it's going negative, and it's actually even more negative. It was about half a standard deviation negative yesterday. It's more than one standard deviation negative on the mean, and you've got a number of members that take it down to almost 2 standard deviations negative. That's going to be, I think, critical to whatever could happen, because where that bottom is probably, those are 15-day blocks. That bottom is toward the end of next week. So the NAO is going to be at its max negative maybe Friday, Saturday, and Sunday of next week, which would time out to the way the GFS today played all this. And I should also point out that There's a lot of model differences here with this. The Pacific North America index is negative, so there's troughing coming into the west. It's not ideally you'd probably want to see that positive, but we've got a weird configuration coming up because we have a negative PNA, a negative NAO, and a negative East Pacific oscillation, Joe. And if you remember back in 2018, we had that triplicate where they were all off the wall. We've never seen it since the repeat performance of this, where they were all like 4 standard deviations from where they should be. All three of them were negative from late February through the month of March, and of course that was the year that we had those 4 nor'easters. So it's a bit of an odd pattern, but that negative EPO, the East Pacific oscillation, is what drives the cold, and that's going to be, I think, uh, something to pay close attention to. And as we look at the upper air, a couple of things that struck me about it was the fact that yeah, you've got that big ridge. This is for Wednesday. This is today. Today's Wednesday, right?
It is. Last
Yeah.
time I looked.
I lost track. But you got this big upper high uh, sitting up in the Northeast Pacific. There's a cutoff low to the south that extends down to Hawaii, and of course, in that, if you follow the flow, you can see exactly where our air is coming from, northern Canada, and because it's November. The air is cold. Make no mistake. I mean, we're going to see temperatures that are going to be 10 degrees below normal. That's a pretty sizable anomaly for this time of year. But if this pattern in January would be really interesting. I think we would really be seeing some off-the-wall cold in some places. But nonetheless, it's a cold pattern. But you always have to remember that it's the middle of November to put it in context. And you can see how the trough just broadens out. It's cold everywhere relative to normal. And these shortwave troughs that are moving through the Great Lakes, of course, we've got the big lake effect event up there because of these deep short waves. The last one comes through on Sunday, and then finally that trough lifts out. But there's another one, another rotating upper low at Hudson Bay that comes around, and now in the west you have energy coming off the Gulf of Alaska into California that pushes east across the southern plains. And because we have blocking here, now this would be at the point where we have that negative NAO. All this is higher than normal pressures up here from Greenland into north central Canada. Now,
Right.
if that materializes, and at the same time, by the way, you got a nice ridge here that's building up in the west with a deep trough that's at around 140, 145. This is a pretty decent setup. Also, we've got this upper low that's not too far from the 50-50 benchmark. So there's a very blocky look here, and the idea is that this trough would probably it can't lift up. There's an arm that goes back to the Western Lakes. You've got the southern energy here. It can't lift up and take a low to our west, so it has to kind of go underneath us, and that's exactly what the 12Z model run did. Now, of course, you couldn't have, there were hints of this. We saw this yesterday on the primary run, and the day before we talked about how the blocking was probably going to be more important, and the model seems to picks up on that. But then, of course, you're going to have a run like the 18Z, which is totally different. Yeah, it's got the blocky look, but it doesn't really have that second arm, Joe. In fact, it's got a short wave all of a sudden that drops into New England on Friday and into Saturday, which the other model really didn't, the other one really didn't have. And the southern stream system is pinned down as a cutoff in East Texas.
Right.
So
what a cutoff.
Yeah. So what happens is it waits for that upper low east of Newfoundland to pull out, and then it gets ejected, pretty much straight east with no consequence. It's a different outcome. Ultimately, it's a blocky look, though. When you go out to the long range, the middle and long range, you've got some serious blocking going, Scandinavian blocking going on that's pushing up into Greenland. So it's a very interesting pattern here that we're getting with the upper air. And I'm going to bring this is the northern hemisphere. You see where the block is, what's going on. I'll focus your attention right up here. Okay, that is that's part of the NAO calculation. So the NAO it can be negative, but you have to look and see where the highest pressures are. And if you look on the hemispheric map here, this is for Monday the 28th. The highest pressures are actually to the east of Greenland. And if I go backwards, um, you kind of see that it's even at the moment. This is Friday. Uh, the upper high up here, that's to the east of Greenland, and that again, that's part of that NAO calculation. Here's your East Pacific upper high for the negative EPO. This works out also to a negative NAO, and we're cold. The question is going to be if that Scandinavian block can push into Greenland, which it actually does next week, and that's going to be key. One of the keys to what ultimately winds up happening late next week. And then we can go back to the 12Z GFS, which is the primary run. So we're going to give it a little more credence here. You can see what happens. Let me just roll it back. Of course, there's not much going on in the country except for what's going on around the lakes. There's really not much in the way of precip. Over the weekend, you get some Gulf moisture there. You see a low goes out over Florida. So, David, here, take a look. I mean, you've got for Monday, there's some kind of Gulf wave that crosses Florida and then moves out to the east. But now you got this big high coming down from Canada. The lows in the southern plains. It moves into Kentucky. You've got snow breaking out, pretty much how CPC has it. The low tries to go to the west, but it can't because of that big high that's sitting up east of Lake Winnipeg. So with the blocking, it gets forced out to the east and passes off the Delaware coast and goes east-northeast. My only comment on this, Joe, is if the blocking is stronger, I think I'm going to go back to 2 days ago. If the blocking is stronger, I think what you could wind up seeing is maybe a flatter, further south look to this. A flatter, when I may say flatter, I mean weaker. A weaker and further south look to it than what you're seeing here. That would be one possibility. And then the other possibility is that the model is wrong on that big high coming down and you wind up taking a low that goes to Pittsburgh and it's mostly rain for most people except for the far inland areas like we saw yesterday.
Yeah, and on my Facebook page, I did make an allusion to it. I don't normally do this, but since it is going to be Thanksgiving later next week from tomorrow, I had a picture, or I did a cartoon of a turkey who's like running around. And I wrote, Turkey Day itself should be okay weather-wise, but the rest of the holiday weekend might not be so pleasant, with computer model guidance hinting at significant rain and or snow for the tri-state area. But I wouldn't sweat this just yet. However, because as we are talking about a potential more than a week away, as you know, anything can happen that far down the road. And indeed, anything can and will happen. So we'll see how it all comes out in the wash. But I only did this because that's going to be the biggest travel weekend supposedly of the year. A lot of people will be traveling en route to Grandma's house, let's say on Wednesday, and will be traveling around during Thanksgiving weekend. So they want to know. If my memory serves me, last year, the Thanksgiving weekend, well, I know Sunday was okay because Renata and I actually flew out on the Sunday of Thanksgiving weekend and had no real weather problems. I think last Thanksgiving, we had a pretty good weather pattern for the holiday weekend. This upcoming weekend, Thanksgiving weekend, maybe not so, but we shall see.
Well, I was in the hospital last
That's
year.
Right. That's
so
right.
So I have no idea what the weather was like because I was having an emergency appendectomy. One of the big differences, by the way, and I had it on the screen there a moment ago, was the fact that the European has a less blocky look. But the European also, Joe, has a 968 low going to the Great Lakes, and I somehow think that may not be right. I think that's just a shade overdone.
I think so. 968. I mean,
968.
that sounds like the kind of storm system where which caused the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald
Right.
back in November of 1975. If they indeed had that kind of a storm system crossing through the Great Lakes at that intensity. By the way, a short and sweet synopsis for the immediate New York City tri-state area, also listed on my Facebook page. I said expect dry and unseasonably chilly weather over these next 7 days. The average mid-afternoon high temperatures will run about 7 degrees below normal. The coldest stretch will come, and we've been talking about this now, during the 3-day period from this Saturday through Monday of next week. And the probability of any precipitation over these next 7 days, and then this is subjective, I gave it a paltry 8% probability for precipitation, less than 10%. So you can be sure that you're not going to be seeing any kind of significant rain and or snow over these next 7 days coming up.
Yes, indeed. So the chairman, Scott Briller, is sick in bed with with a fever. So he's got whatever viral plague that's running around today. Apparently, there's there's a virus running around that's a different kind of virus, not COVID, but your standard virus that a lot of people are getting, and apparently a lot of people are calling out sick. These last number of days, many businesses, from what I understand, are having a tough time. So he's got a bug. So it's in bed with soup and some nasty television. That should soothe you and make you better in no time. So,
well, I have the Briller Jeopardy for tonight.
Okay.
And Scott says one more state nicknames for Briller Jeopardy. We've got 5 more states, and we'll start off with number 1, which is the state of Utah. What is the nickname? What is the nickname for the state of Utah?
The bigamy state. Just kidding to all our Utah fans. Utah is a beautiful state, probably one of the most beautiful states in the country. Miss Fallerite says the Canyon State. Rich Rothmansky says the Beehive State. Johnny Sachs says the Salt State. You stop me, Joe, when somebody gets what I say.
Somebody's already got it. Rich Rothmansky got it.
The Beehive State.
The
yes.
Beehive State.
Yes. Okay. Yes. On to the next one.
Number 2, Wyoming.
Wyoming. The first state to give women the right to vote, by the way, the state of Wyoming.
And that's a nice hint as to what Wyoming is known for, or known as.
So it's like freedom related.
Well, I mean, if only men were able to vote, and then in Wyoming,
then it would be the beer state. The beer and cigar state. Miss Fallerite says the cowboy state. Johnny Sachs says the goat state. Dave Seismic Coy Wolf says Big Sky. That's Montana. Helen Bertona says the Eagle state.
Well, now back up a bit. I just said that when Joe talked about Wyoming being the first state to give the vote to women, that was the hint.
The equality state?
The equality state.
Oh,
yes.
Wow.
Yes.
That was a pure guess on my part, but, the equality state.
That's right. All right.
And Miss Fallerite points out gingerly that the women had to go vote because the men were all out on the ranch.
All right. Number 3 on the list of 5, we have West Virginia.
West Virginia.
West Virginia. What is the nickname for that state?
West Virginia. Hmm. Now, West Virginia actually was part of the state of Virginia until it split away because before the Civil War, because Virginia was, went Confederate, and um, West Virginia stayed loyal to the Union. That area stayed loyal to Union, and became a state on its own. Um, hmm, that's well, Frank Riccio, Tommy Clams, and Helen Bertona, because it's the West Virginia Mountaineers, so they says the Mountain State. Johnny
And
Sachs says Coal State, but I'm guessing it's the Mountaineers, right? The Mountain State.
it's the mountain state. That's correct. And I can assure you, having been to West Virginia, they have a lot of mountains, a lot of curvy, swervy roads that go through those mountains.
Oh,
And
please.
and yes, and I've driven through West Virginia on the way back from Kentucky during a time when the winds were blowing at like 40 to 50 miles per hour in gusts. And my father-in-law, who was in the back seat, as I'm trying to negotiate these curvy, swervy roads on these through these high mountains. He's like, yelling in the back, saying, "He says, what the heck are you doing? It's crazy. I could be driving better than you." I could. That was the day I couldn't win. But anyway,
All
West
right.
Virginia, the Mountain State, yes. And number four
Wait,
on
wait,
the
wait. But
list.
just real quick. When I drove back from New York the last time, when I drove at night, there was construction, so I had to drive. I forgot what state road it was from Western Maryland. Excuse me, down, and it went through West Virginia and Virginia. But the thing is that this road was one of those winding, curvy roads. So every 2 miles, I would be going in and out of the state of Virginia. So my GPS would keep literally, Joe, every 2 minutes. Welcome to Virginia. Welcome to West Virginia. Welcome to Virginia. Welcome to West Virginia. It was it was insane. It was utterly insane. I'm like, pick a state and just stay there.
That if those who live in the immediate tri-state area who traveled into the lower Hudson Valley are aware that there's a stretch of 684, Interstate 684, that ever so briefly for about 1 mile crosses over into Connecticut. And so you see the sign, "Welcome to Connecticut," and you're in the Connecticut for about a mile, then you're out of Connecticut and back in New York State. "Welcome to New York." Like, boy,
Yes.
that was quick. But
Number
number
four.
Number four is Tennessee. Come on and see Tennessee
Well, I'm
tuxedo.
going to go with, since they was the West Virginia Mountaineers, the Tennessee Volunteers. I'll say the Volunteer State.
And you see now, give the people on the chat board at least a chance here, Joe. You're absolutely right.
Although
It is.
I like Johnny Sack's answer, which is the Moonshine State. Actually, just a little bit on that. Where I live, I live in a dry county here, and a couple of counties that surround me are also dry. And it's the reason is because years ago, moonshine was a big deal here. And in fact, there's a moonshine place where you can go to right near me, and it's pretty cool actually. But they had their own lobby with the government, the state government, to keep. They wanted to keep the liquor out of here because they had a monopoly on the business. So that's where that comes from. Um, Christinapedia says the dry state. Yes, no, it's not quite dry. There's always ways. I can go 20 miles into Murphy, North Carolina, and you can get all the liquor you want. Uh, okay, so anyway, it's the volunteer state. So what is the next one?
The last state of the night, this is number five, is Maryland.
Maryland, my Maryland. Um, Established by the British Lord Baltimore as a haven for Catholics. Um, Maryland, Maryland. I should know this. Um, let's see. Jason Schaefer says the old line state. Johnny Sachs 77 says the Ripken state. Uh, what is that? Despouse daughter says for the Free State. Miss Fowlerite says the Mason-Dixon state. Um, let's see. Weather Doctor says the Old Line state. Mark D42, the Free State. Mark Gladfelter, the Free State. Um,
Well,
yeah, Helen Bertona. Yeah, the Maryland Flower is the Black-Eyed Susan. So I don't think it's the Black-Eyed Susan state. So
well, first of all, whoever said it was Miss Spallerite said Mason Dixon, and I'm going to make the assumption that the Mason Dixon line is reference to the actual name of nickname for the state. There are actually two names for Maryland. There is the Free State or the Old Line State, and my presumption is that the Old Line happens to be the Mason Dixon line. So for those of you who said Mason Dixon, excuse me, for those of you who said the Free State, or those of you who said Old Line State, both of you, both of those are correct. But I would also say that connected to that would be, the Mason-Dixon line. So maybe in a small way, Miss Spallerite was actually right with
yes.
her
And by the
guess as
way,
well.
so when they run the Preakness, the blanket of flowers that they put over the winning horse is a blanket of, it's supposed to be Black-Eyed Susans. The problem is that the races run in the third week of May when there are no Black-Eyed Susans. They don't bloom for another month or so. So those are actually daisies that are painted. They paint the middles of them to make them look like Black-Eyed Susans.
Ah,
So you can't
well,
even have an honest black-eyed Susan.
you
Uh,
you you do what you have to do, I guess, right?
yes, exactly. So on that note, we will call it a night, and Joe and I will be back tomorrow night at 7:35 Eastern Time. Who was it that hit Super Chat tonight? I didn't see. Mentioned it earlier.
Let me see if it's still up on my end.
It was Chuck Cardillo.
Chuck Cardillo hit,
Is one.
and that's as far as I can go. So if you
Yeah.
did hit it, and if we didn't mention it tonight, we're sorry.
Yes.
That's all we could. That's all we can say.
But thank you, all the same. Thank you very
Yes.
much.
Yes.
And we'll be back tomorrow night. So everybody stay safe and see you tomorrow at 7:35. Nighty night.
Good night, all.